Hello everyone, welcome to Coaches on the Couch. I'm Rachel Birchmore and I'm here with a quick introduction for any new listeners out there just to the podcast before we get into today's conversation. So we're about 5 years in now and 80 episodes, and with my co-host Louise Rogers we explore all aspects of leadership in the built environment. And Louise and I are both leadership coaches and we support individuals and teams, and we come together to design and deliver leadership development programs for architects, engineers and other consultants across the built environment. So more about that at stepuplondon.com, or drop me an email at rachel@stepuplondon.com. So today's conversation is with Sebastian Wood of Whitby Wood, and let's jump right into that now. So, hi everyone, welcome back to Coaches on the Couch. I'm Rachel Birchmore.
And I'm Louise Rogers.
And today we're really pleased to be joined by Sebastian Wood, who is Managing Director of Whitby Wood. Hi Seb, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now we're going to ask you to tell us something brief and interesting about your couch, but we can see from the photo there is some incredible artwork. So hopefully that forms part of the story.
I was more curious about that than the couch.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's actually got, it's funny when you asked me to do it, it's actually got a lot more meaning than I had realized. So the artwork in my eldest daughter, who's 25, is a bespoke tailor. And the artwork is from her final year at London School of Fashion, where, you know, in a typical designer way, you have to sort of show the story of how you get to your final piece of work. She did it, and like a lot of people, they sort of do this work and then they go, right, chuck it in the bin. And my late wife said, this is we should have this on the wall. So we put it on the wall. And then the couch is actually I've reclaimed this. I've got 2 front rooms in my house, and I've got 5 kids, and there's a lot going on. And so I claimed this room as my own for to have as a study. And this couch is secondhand off Gumtree or something like that from a guy around the corner, and it looks quite nice, but it's terribly uncomfortable.
Oh no! I hate it when that happens.
It's not a slouchy couch.
Right. Well, the artwork is stunning. You can tell your daughter from us that I wanted to zoom in and look at all the detail.
Yeah, it is. It's got a lot of there's a lot of story behind it.
So Seb, as we said in our introduction, you're Managing Director of Whitby Wood, which is a 220 strong international engineering practice, and that's structural, civil and geotechnical. And you co-founded the practice with Mark Whitby in 2016. Your team is across 5 offices here in the UK, as well as in India, Serbia, Singapore and UAE. And it's a practice built around people, sustainability and technology. And the ambition is to be the leading international engineering consultancy in sustainable design. And we wondered, because obviously there's a huge body of work there, but are there a couple of projects, Seb, which stand out for you as the kind of epitome of Whitby Wood's approach?
This was a hard one to think about because there are lots, and I think a lot of people would probably say that we think of ourselves as project agnostic in a sense. We enjoy the process of design and helping people fulfill their ambitions and doing something useful for society. But I think the sort of selection I put was, and there's slightly more than a few, but I'll rattle through them. There's Tottenham Hale, which is a big 5 or 6 building scheme we did with Related Argent, and they were very good to us in the very early days. They had a lot of faith in us and gave us a very big piece of work, and I like to think that we paid them. And that was with 3 different architects, and that was it's real houses for real people, and it's really quite special. So it's a commercial scheme. Then we did Greenwich Design District with Night Dragon, which had 8 different architects, and that is super funky. And actually on that one we also took an MEP practice underneath us to deliver it. And then we've got Edinburgh Concert Hall, which has just started on site, and I think we've been working on that for 6 or 7 years. That's with David Chipperfield. And then my last 2, there's the boardwalk at British Land at Canada Water, which is with Asif Khan, and it's bridges are just beautiful, and it's a lovely meeting place. And then the last one is one that's on site at the moment, and it's with a developer called IJM Land, and we're building it with Midgard, and it's super complicated engineering and just a wonderful team of very, very hardworking people trying to get something extraordinary done.
Mm.
So I probably could go on and on and on, but it's quite a broad flavour.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
sounds it. And complexity and mixture of multiple architects that seem to
Yeah,
come over.
in so many of our projects, we have been called by a client who has said, we'd like some help with X. And that could be a developer, it could be an end user, it could be an architect, it could be a contractor. You can always look backwards and sort of say what a practice was meant to be. But I think the truth is, for most people, it evolves and you start somewhere. But I think this sort of common theme is we have a really special culture which we're always sort of nurturing like a small child or something. It's so precious, and you're not totally sure what it is, but you know what it isn't. um, and that through that culture, amazing things happen because
Yeah.
when you fulfill people, then they perform, and then people want to work with them. And so I think that's what we've worked out over time, that actually this culture thing, whatever it is super important.
And we'll no doubt come back to a little bit
Yes.
of that and the evolving nature of culture, practice, and indeed leadership. But as if that wasn't enough, you're also a board director of the Schumacher Centre for New Economics, a founding trustee of Construction and Development Partnership, and a trustee of the Whitby Bird Foundation. And Seb, when we first met, your energy and depth of thought around leadership really comes across. That really struck me, as did one of the phrases you used, which was leadership is a reflective journey of who I am, which we want to come back to in the
Hey.
conversation. And we talked at the time about leadership being a living thing that evolves. So back to that word again. And I think so often you meet leaders who feel like they've sort of got there and they're almost arms folded and that's it. I've mastered this leadership thing as if it's something that's static. And your approach seemed to be quite different. So the importance of reflection to leaders will be at the heart of what we want to talk about today.
And perhaps we could start though, just with a brief kind of potted history of how Whitby Wood came into being.
Sure. I mean, I probably need to go back, and I'll do it quickly. I met Mark. I came out of university. I studied at Exeter. I hadn't really enjoyed the course. I really loved engineering, but the course it wasn't particularly inspiring. But what had inspired me was music. I've always been a music lover, and I had planned to set up a record shop with a friend of mine. And then the lady Jenny, who became my wife, we actually had our first baby in the fourth year of university. So I thought actually I'd better take life a bit more seriously. And my father, who at the time was running a housing association called London and Quadrant, reached out to a friend of his called David Levitt Bernstein, and said, "Who should my son apply to?" And he said, "Oh, Whitby Bird." And so I met Mark in an interview, and we got on. And I joined. I did a master's in leadership and sustainable development, paid for by Mark, very generous of him. And then I came back and worked my way through Whitby Bird, which was then sold to Ramboll. And then I became a director. And at the end of my tenure at Ramboll, I went to New Delhi in India to set up an outsourcing center for them for 2 years, and took my wife and 5 kids with me. And at the end of that, for various reasons, my wife said, "I think it's time to bring the relationship with your employer to an end." And so I reached out to Mark, and he wanted to set up again. And so we set up together. And I think he thought I would be a good go. I'm now 48, he's 75, so there's a bit of an age gap. But I had been pretty entrepreneurial. So going back to the music thing, in my early days as a graduate, I didn't have enough money to support my Jenny and Ella, my eldest. And so I ran a nightclub at the weekends. Um, and and then after that, with the same guy I ran the nightclub with, we started a renewable energy business, and this was all sort of moonlighting.
As you do.
And so and Mark knew about it and sort of thought, right, this guy's really always wanted to do his own thing. So that was the basis of his conversation with me, and the basis of my conversation with him was that he might be able to be the sensible one. And so we set up together in 2016, and it was very special. There were a number of clients who immediately who it's relationships. I had good relationships, particularly with the Related Argent guys and various people who'd left Argent, gone to British Land. I knew some people at British Land and Hub Residential, and we knew some people at Night Dragon, and they all saw something in Mark and I. And so we very quickly grew a team of people we basically knew, and the magic of the people we knew and had worked with meant that everything was quite seamless, and that just grew. The practice started to grow, and then the same methodology when we set up later in India, then Serbia and Singapore were people that we knew that wanted to do business with us. And so it was just a sort of it wasn't necessarily we wanted to have an international practice because we wanted to have security of different sources of work, and also to provide interesting challenges for our young engineers who want to try different things. But we didn't plan exactly how it would happen. It was because people saw something in the culture we had created, I think, and thought that we were reasonable people who they could do business with, and that's really why it's flourished, is just good relationships and people being free to express themselves.
It's a great origin story. So in fact, you've got a birthday next year, then 2016 to 2020.
We'll be 10 years old, indeed.
And that's a lot of growth in 10 years. So what do you put that down to?
I think Mark and I are very different people. Mark is an extraordinary man, not only as a designer, as an engineer, as a teacher, as a thinker. He really is a unique person, and I'm extremely lucky that he's my business partner and friend. What we do have in common is the belief that everyone is capable of great things, and the secret is to find a way to unlock them. And so which comes back to this cultural thing. We spend most of our time as a leadership team talking about our staff and how's it going and what can be done to make them, express themselves, do better, and how can we support them. And so I think when you focus on that as a thing, people work harder, they perform better, clients get a better response, they get a better product, and then they come back to you and ask you to do more things. And then what we've had along the way, there have been various people that have reached out, and we've recently had another one, an old colleague who's decided to join us, and they're coming in January. And then when that happens, it's like sort of Mark always uses this analogy of a chariot, and that that as long as you get all the horses running in the same direction, you can go very, very fast and make sure they don't fight each other. And what happens is, if you create this atmosphere, then you're not really thinking about how fast you're growing or what you want to grow to. It just kind of happens. And so what we then have to do, one of the things we definitely do that has enabled it, is we think ahead. So we well, if we carry on growing at this rate, what are we going to need in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months time? Extra support staff, whatever, more office space. And when you think like that, things tend to happen that way because your mindset is in a particular space. So I think it's thinking ahead, it's culture, and believing in people.
That's really interesting, because it sounds like it's contained, as it were, by so I've got this picture now of this chariot with these horses all in the same direction, going at quite a pace. And the thinking ahead, sort of knowing about where that path or road is heading much further down the line, so that the chariot can carry on moving. Is it so it's constrained, not constrained, it's contained within the culture within the way that you're thinking, within the way that you're planning, rather than by a sort of goal or a definite vision. Is that
Yeah,
right?
definitely. We do talk about growth. So why would you grow? There's no, there's two main reasons. One is if you believe in your staff, if you're so we're bringing in, I think, 10 graduates this year, maybe 8. Now, if you let's say half of them stay with you over a period of time, if that's going to happen, either and you've got you the way that happens with good people is that you provide opportunity for their growth. And so in order to do that, you've got two choices. You either grow or you have to move people on. And actually, if you don't want to move people on because they're really great and actually they're really enjoying it, then you've got to grow. So there's the sort of growth in order to create opportunity. And then the other side of growth is that clients are essentially asking you to grow by saying you're doing a great job. Can you do some more for us?
Mm.
And we don't. I think we're both comfortable with either whether we stayed the same size or grew a bit more. We've been very lucky that the people that have grown up with us in the business have all taken on great responsibility, which is just then they've flourished, we've flourished. It's just a self-fulfilling positive cycle.
Well, yeah, it's clear that that entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well. I don't want to milk the analogy, but just to think about that a little bit more with the chariot racing ahead. It could be said that a racing chariot doesn't have a great deal of time for reflection, and yet you strike us both as being a very reflective person. So how does that work?
I mean, I am quite a reflective person in the sense that I think a lot. But I would say the core of the reflective part of the business that's emanated out is that Mark and I have walking meetings. So we'll go for a walk. And in the different offices we've always had a sort of little route. And we've recently moved offices, but the last office we were in was in Lower Marsh, and there was a little park to the west of Lower Marsh that we'd go and do circuits around. And when you walk and talk, there's this strange thing that happens that because you're not actually looking at each other, it allows you to have a sort of different level of honesty.
Yeah, totally get that. Yeah.
And also I've heard that walking, because it's an automated bodily thing, a bit like as you fall asleep, it can also make you quite imaginative. And I mean, I've got I owe an awful lot to Mark because he's particularly good at turning scenarios round and saying, well, imagine if we thought of it like this or thought of it this way. And so you can look at it from lots of directions. But I think this point of reflection, I think the core of it is trying to have a form of honesty with yourself and honesty with the situation. So the honesty and authenticity, I think, in you as a person makes you happier. It makes you better at what you do because I think people can smell if you're being you or not. And it makes decision making easier because you're kind of rooted in this trying to be you, trying to be what you really are. And I think that's part and parcel with reflection. And over time, and it's an active thing. It's not a static thing of this is what we should be. Are we being what we said we would be? It's a continually evolving reflection of where you are now.
Love that.
And
Yeah.
and so and I think for me, in terms of leadership or coaching or whatever, that the reason why good leadership is hard is because you have to constantly be reflective and honest with yourself. And it's not a sort of following a set of rules. It's this constant, challenge. And if you can do that in partnership, that's even more powerful.
Oof, I've got 100 questions all at once then.
Just pick one, Rachel.
No, just pick one. I'm wondering, if that way of being, which is obviously very natural for you, Seb, I mean, we're watching you speak, reflecting with no notes or anything over what you're going to say, which is really nice to watch. I'm wondering if that way of being extends to your wider leadership team.
I think it does.
Right.
I and it's not. I think. I mean, part of part of active piece of 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 me. I can say Mark and I, but let's say me is
Mm.
partly my upbringing, and I'm one of six. I'm in the middle. I'm a middle child. We had debate around the table. You get to work out how to deal with your ego pretty early on in life. And then Mark and I have got together and we've sort of found each other in this reflective space. And then we have we've got this leadership team, and we, I think, both in different ways encouraged them to think reflectively. And part of that is actually really stepping back. I mean, I think that in probably a lot of practices, particularly with design, where you know there's this sort of central design leadership idea. The temptation is to stay on top of it, really to sort of dictate everything, and actually to allow people to grow, to continue to grow. At the beginning it was okay, it's just Mark and I, and there's lots of people you're trying to grow underneath you. But once they're around the table with you, at some point you have to say, no, they are equal, in order to allow them to step into the space where they can be reflective and give their ideas, and you can chat. You have to really step back, and you have to say less, and
Mm.
you have to ask more questions. And I think also part of that I think I mentioned this when we had our pre-chat, is that we've only just discovered this and we're trying to think of a way of articulating it. Mark has got, although he's not a Quaker, he has Quaker roots, and I have Catholic roots. And there is a sort of we basically, our philosophy around decision making in the director room is that we talk about things until we agree. So we're not sitting there and going, we're voting, or Mark and I have decided, or anything like that. It's like, we've got this idea, let's talk about it. And actually, it's a very active, reflective form of leadership. The result is people talk, people compromise, we move forward together. Once we get to a decision, everyone's behind it, and so which then encourages more reflection. It encourages more people to say what they feel.
I just twigged actually, said that your father, Don Wood, because I
Yes.
worked I worked at London and Quadrant.
No,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, I was their first communications manager.
How amazing.
And the little neural pathway just kicked into, because he
How
was
amazing.
he was a very distinctive leader at London and Quadrant. I learnt leadership lessons
He
from
he
your
he
father.
is I've learned so much from him, and I can tell you he's still alive and well. He's
Good.
80.
I didn't
And
didn't know how to put
um
that, so I'm very glad to hear
no,
that.
no, no. And my mum says, and this is going back to this sort of reflective, evolving leadership. My father got a gong. He was I remember going to his leaving do, and the receptionists were there. I'm pretty sure the cleaners were there, and they were all
Yeah,
in
probably.
tears. And he's an extraordinary leader. But my mum says she's most proud of his work now, and his work now is essentially playing various support roles at our local parish church. And I think and what she means by that is the humbleness of it, which I find personally the most amazing leaders have a core humbleness to them, which allows other people in, and people look to them for guidance and leadership, but at the same time they are in a open space of listening about what other people think, and where they're going. The fact that he hasn't, he hasn't said, well, I've got a gong and I've been this great chief executive. He's just progressed in his life, and he's now doing something equally important. And I think that's this old idea of evolving leadership is it kind of never ends.
I think also there's that sort of thing about having that goes along with having clarity about the contribution that you can make,
Yeah.
and when it's time to
Yep.
recognize that you've made that contribution and it's time to do something new, which I think that's what your dad did when he
He
left.
did.
It was a
He did.
yeah.
Yeah. And another really just a little anecdote. I remember his last year at L&Q, and I don't know the exact details, but and it should have been for many people, it would have been kind of, this sort of celebratory year of, like doing a final lap or something. But I'm pretty sure my mum said that it was one of his hardest years, and the reason was because he was going to his leadership team. Listen, you were great for me, but the next guy or girl needs a clear run at things. And I think you need to think about moving on. And so he had this very difficult, and he just he took every piece of responsibility hugely seriously, left his ego at the door and did the difficult things. And I'm always, whenever I've come across difficult points in my, journey, he's always the sort of go-to for. I mean, I even remember when he talks about, for example, when you have an employee where it's not working and you've tried lots of different things, and sometimes you can't, for whatever reason, you can't make the best version of this person, and then they go somewhere else and they flourish. And sometimes you have to sort of in some way manage them out. And I remember with one particular person, and I was sort of, wringing my hands over it and worrying terribly about how they might be feeling and what we should do. And my father said, "Listen, Seb, um, you need to now start thinking what the rest of your staff are thinking, and what they're thinking is,
Mm,
why aren't you as the leader dealing with this problem?" And he flipped it around to something that was about the greater good of the organization, as opposed to some sort of obsession that I had between how I was feeling and this person.
mm,
And that sort of ability to sort of look at things from different perspectives and then work out the best course of action. And the other thing he always says is, if you do something well, at some point in their life, that person will look back and say thank you for it. It might not be straight away, but they aren't happy where they are, because if they were, they'd be doing really well. But anyway, he's a big inspiration.
Incredible to hear all of that. We're probably coming towards the end of our
can't believe
conversation,
it.
which
That went
is,
very
I know,
quickly.
it's a real shame. There'll have to be a part two. But just as, I mean, we've only met a few times, Seb, and I've got about 4 or 5 book recommendations from you. So I wondered if we could just talk a little bit about that, maybe by looping all the way back to where we started, back to that couch, and just ask
Yeah.
you, when you're sitting on that couch and you're grabbing a book,
Mm.
what you might be reading.
My core things that I end up reading are usually things about dry stuff, about organization and leadership and stuff like that. And the other really important thing is spirituality for me, and the sort of mystery of life and why we are here and what is purpose and happiness. And my latest things that I'm reading is Jonathan Sachs, which is, but it's who's a who's an incredible connection between the contemporary and the ancient and spirituality, and he covers leadership, and he covers the two really absolute whoppers for me are lessons in leadership, and then the one I'm reading at the moment, which is morality. And which sounds very pompous, and but actually they're this sort of dissection of society and where we're at and what's going on, and it's so useful. These insights are so useful in running an organization, because it's fundamentally about people and where they're going, and what really is the thing that lights someone's fire and makes them want to get up in the morning. And it's this meaning something and being part of something. And I had this incredible experience recently through my gym. As a lady who found herself in TikTok in COVID, and she's a lawyer, and she they were and TikTok actually, believe it or not, had one of the more advanced child protection things where notifications would be turned off after 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or something. And she came out of that and then was used to help develop the online safety bill for the government. And so I met her and we had this conversation. I was like, oh wow, what did you find out? And it was these three things of belonging, mastery, and agency, which were these three really important things that created fulfilled, happy young people. And I think it's probably true of any person. And the idea was you belong to something, you're part of something, you're in a team, you're in a company, we're human beings have always wanted to be together and part of something. You've got a mastery of something that is therefore useful to the group or to society. And then the last one is agency, which is you feel that your acts are worth it and you can move the dial. You have agency to do something. And this sort of stuff that comes out of Jonathan Sachs at the moment, but lots of different sources, is the real stuff that enables you to make people tick, and really understanding what makes someone do something amazing or come up with the brilliant idea that they thought of in the shower that morning or whatever it is. And so I think I have this sort of deep interest in the human psyche. My late wife, before she died, was studying child psychotherapy. So I've got a whole bookshelf to my right here full of her books, which I haven't got into yet, but one point I will.
Yeah, one book at a time.
One book at a time.
That's really inspirational, Seb. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes.
Not at all. Great pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Really enjoyed it.
So much in there. Love to do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, maybe for your anniversary next year.
Yeah, love to.
Ask you all those questions that we've written down that we didn't get around to, like what next for Whitby Wood? Having your name above the door, what does that mean? And all that. We'll come on to that next time.
Indeed.
Okie doke.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.